Why you should never take life too seriously. Alan Watts' advice. Have you ever looked at your life and wondered, is this it? Is this what it's all really about? You wake up, follow routines, chase goals, stress over deadlines, compare yourself to others, and try to hold it all together. But beneath all of that, beneath the hustle, the seriousness, the endless striving, there's a quiet whisper, a kind of cosmic joke that nobody wants to admit out loud. And Alan Watts, arguably one of the most electrifying philosophical voices of the 20th century, leaned in close to that whisper and said, life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. And the moment you truly understand that, everything changes. We take life so seriously, we act like it's a test, like there's a scoreboard, like some invisible judge is watching us, waiting to declare whether or not we lived correctly. We obsess over success, over legacy, over being remembered. But Watts flips that idea on its head. He says, you are under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago. That thought is both terrifying and liberating, isn't it? Because it means that most of the seriousness we attach to our identities is optional. It's a game we've decided to play but forgot we were playing. That's the first big truth here. Life is more like a dance than a destination. It's not a journey with a finish line, it's not a ladder with a top rung. It's music. And you don't listen to music to get to the end. You listen to feel, to move, to be immersed. If you were at a concert and someone rushed the band to get to the last note, everyone would look at them like they'd missed the point. Yet that's what we do with life, rushing to the next achievement, the next relationship, the next thing that will finally make us feel complete. Alan Watts invites us to pause and ask, what if we've misunderstood the whole purpose of life? What if the point isn't to be somebody great, but to play, beautifully, spontaneously, like a child who doesn't care who's watching? We've been conditioned to think that play is childish and seriousness is mature. But maybe it's the other way around. Maybe seriousness is what happens when we forget that we're part of something far more mysterious and far less controllable than we're willing to admit.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
And that mystery, that sense of unknowing, is where the magic lives. Watts wasn't interested in answers so much as he was in the questions that unshackled the mind. He used paradox, humor, and a kind of mischievous wisdom to show that the universe is not a machine, but a living, breathing paradox. He said, trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. That's the kind of sentence that short-circuits your brain just long enough for clarity to sneak in through the back door. So now I'll ask you, what are you taking too seriously right now? Your job, your image, your future, your regrets? What would happen if you loosened your grip on those things? Just a little. Not to give up on them, but to stop letting them define the meaning of your life. What if you're not here to prove anything? What if you're here to feel everything? To laugh, to cry, to mess up, to try again? What if you're here not to win, but to play? This is the second truth. Seriousness is often fear in disguise. We become serious when we're afraid of failure, of judgment, of losing control. But control is an illusion. Watts famously said, the more a thing tends to be permanent, the more it tends to be lifeless. Life is not permanent, it's not static, it's never under control. And when we try to control it, we squeeze the life out of it, like trying to hold water in a clenched fist. What do you get? Nothing but tension and emptiness. But open your palm, and the water stays for a moment. It rests, it flows, it reflects. You see, the wisdom of not taking life too seriously isn't about being irresponsible or apathetic. It's the opposite. It's about engaging with life more fully because you're not paralyzed by pressure. It's about making room for joy, for curiosity, for wonder. It's about realizing that you are not a separate observer of life. You are life. And when you laugh at the absurdity of it all, you're not being disrespectful to its depth. You're honoring it. So here's the challenge I want to leave you with in this first part. For just one day, try approaching your life as if it's a game being played for the joy of it. Not a game to win, but one to dance through. Laugh at the small stuff. Don't catastrophize every setback. Smile at the weirdness of your own thoughts. Talk to a stranger with no goal in mind. Stop mid-cat just to watch the sky, because in those moments, you're not escaping life, you're finally living it. The cosmic joke, why the universe might be laughing with you, not at you. Alan Watts had this uncanny ability to make you feel like the universe was playing a trick on you. Not a cruel one, but a playful cosmic wink. He used to say that taking life too seriously is like going to the theater and forgetting it's a play. We get so caught up in the roles we're playing, parent, student, entrepreneur, artist, success story, failure, that we lose sight of the fact that it's all a kind of performance, and not in the fake, I'm pretending sense, but in the deep, mystical truth that life is not an equation to solve, it's a drama to participate in. And the moment you see that, something inside you releases, the tension loosens, the fear fades, and in its place, you feel something surprising, joy. But why do we resist that joy so much? Why does everything have to be deadly serious? Watts would argue that it's because we've been taught to mistrust spontaneity. We've been trained to be cautious, to weigh every decision, to avoid looking foolish. Yet if you observe a child, or even better, an animal, you'll notice that their joy comes from their total immersion in the present moment. They aren't asking themselves if what they're doing is meaningful in the grand scheme of things. They're just being. They're laughing because something felt funny, dancing because a song came on, exploring because curiosity pulled them into motion. That's life unfiltered. That's the cosmic joke. And here's the punchline. You've never actually been in control, not once, not ever. You didn't choose to be born, you didn't choose your parents, you didn't choose your genetic code or the time in history you showed up. And yet we walk around as if we're supposed to have it all figured out, as if our job is to master existence and bend it to our will. Watts says, you didn't come into this world, you came out of it, like a wave from the ocean. You are not a stranger here. That changes everything. If you're not a foreigner in the universe, but an expression of it, then the pressure to perform disappears. You're not a mistake trying to fix itself. You're a pattern unfolding in real time. That's why the idea of the cosmic joke is so important. It's not meant to mock you. It's meant to wake you up. is meant to show you that the whole game changes when you stop playing it with clenched fists. When you start laughing at your own seriousness, you begin to access a much deeper intelligence, one that doesn't come from logic or analysis, but from surrender, from play, from trust in the absurd beauty of life as it is. Let's be honest, most of what we stress about won't matter in 5 years. Half the time it won't matter in 5 days. But in the moment, it feels like everything. The late email, the awkward conversation, the missed opportunity. We inflate these things because we believe they define our worth. But Watts would prompt us to ask, what if none of it defines you? What if your value is not in what you do, but in how you exist? That's what makes the universal's joke so brilliant. It's not about diminishing your life, it's about liberating it. You're not being laughed at, you're being laughed with. Because laughter, in its purest form, is the sound of freedom. It's the release of the illusion that we're supposed to have it all under control. It's the breaking of the spell that says we're separate from the dance of life. And when you hear that laughter, not just in your head, but in your being, you begin to dance differently. You take risks without fearing the fall. You speak more openly, love more fully, fail more proudly. Because now, you're not trying to win at life, you're trying to experience it. So here's a question for you. What would your life feel like if you saw yourself as part of the joke instead of the punchline? Could you laugh at your mistakes? Could you smile at your past instead of being ashamed of it? Could you open your arms to the uncertainty of tomorrow and say, let's see what happens next? That's the Watsian path. Not to escape life, but to enjoy it with your whole being, to see that the seriousness we carry is often borrowed, not chosen, and to realize that letting go of it doesn't make you irresponsible, it makes you real. It makes you present. It connects you to the current of life that's been flowing all along. The freedom of not knowing, how embracing uncertainty sets you free. There's something terrifying about not knowing what's coming next, not knowing if you're on the right path, not knowing what people think of you or if what you're doing will matter in the long run. We're obsessed with clarity, with answers, with certainty. We want to map it all out, to make sense of the chaos, to find some solid ground beneath our feet. But Alan Watts turns that entire instinct inside out and says, what if the not knowing is the very thing that sets you free? What if the discomfort of uncertainty isn't a glitch in the system, but the gateway to a more alive, more spontaneous existence? We live in a culture that worships the idea of control. Control your thoughts, control your time, control your destiny. But Watts reminds us again and again that control is a fantasy. The tighter you grip the wheel, the more you realize that the road beneath you is shifting, the weather is changing, and the car itself is made of dreams. This isn't to say we should be passive or directionless, but rather that we need to wake up to the fact that certainty is not a prerequisite for meaning. In fact, it's often the enemy of meaning. Think about the most profound experiences you've had in your life. Falling in love, standing at the edge of a massive life decision, watching someone you love take their last breath. There's no certainty in those moments. There's only presence, only surrender, only the raw, unfiltered experience of being. And yet, those are the moments we remember. Those are the moments that shape us. Not because we controlled them, but because we let them happen. Because we said yes to the unknown. Watts believed that when we stop demanding that life come with a manual, something extraordinary happens. We start to pay attention. We start to listen not just with our ears, but with our entire being. We become sensitive to the subtleties, the textures of existence. We move away from abstraction and into the direct experience of living, and in that place, we realize that our need for certainty was never about truth, it was about safety. But real safety doesn't come from knowing what's next. It comes from trusting yourself to meet whatever comes. That's why the freedom of not knowing is so profound. It's not about giving up, it's about giving in. To the flow, to the unpredictability, to the dance that's been happening whether you noticed it or not. When you let go of the demand for guarantees, you start to play. You start to experiment, to explore, to create without the weight of expectation. You stop asking, will this work out? And start asking, what do I want to feel, experience, give, become right now? Let me ask you something deeply personal. What part of your life are you holding hostage to certainty? Is there a dream you haven't pursued because you're afraid it won't work? A relationship you're afraid to deepen because you don't know where it will lead? A version of yourself you're scared to become because you can't predict how people will react? What if the only thing standing between you and the life you're meant to live is your addiction to knowing? Uncertainty is not the enemy. In fact, it's the only place where growth happens. Think of nature. A forest doesn't grow in straight lines. Rivers don't flow in predictable patterns. The sky doesn't paint itself the same way twice. Everything that's alive moves with change, and yet we try to live like machines, linear, consistent, controlled. Watts invites us to remember that we're not machines, we're not algorithms, we're living, breathing expressions of the cosmos, and the more we embrace that truth, the more we become who we truly are. This doesn't mean life becomes easy, but it does become lighter. When you stop taking the unknown so seriously, you begin to dance with it. You begin to find beauty in the unexpected, meaning in the mess, and love in the cracks. You realize that life doesn't have to be figured out to be deeply worth living. So here's a final question for this part. What would happen if you stopped trying to figure it all out? What if you allowed yourself to not know and trusted that you'd still be okay? What if you leaned into the mystery instead of resisting it? Because maybe, just maybe, the mystery isn't something to solve, but something to fall in love with. The ultimate liberation, how laughing at life is the highest form of wisdom. There comes a moment, if you're lucky, when the weight of existence becomes so absurd that you can't help but laugh, not out of mockery or denial, but from a place deeper than thought, where laughter becomes a release, a recognition, a surrender. Alan Watts often said that the final, ultimate wisdom is to laugh at yourself, not to belittle your experience, but to transcend it. To realize that the seriousness with which we approach life is often the very thing that keeps us from truly living it, because life in all its beauty and chaos is not a test, but a joke, so cosmic, so profound, that only laughter can do it justice. Think about it. We worry endlessly about our image, our legacy, our status, all while spinning on a tiny blue rock hurtling through endless space. We plan and strive and stress about the next thing, while the very breath we're taking right now, the only real thing we ever have, is passing unnoticed. We construct entire identities out of social expectations, fear, ambition, and memory, and then suffer when they crack. But when you zoom out even slightly, none of it is as heavy as it seems. It's not meaningless, but it's not deadly serious either. That's the paradox. The more you see the absurdity of life, the more you fall in love with it. You stop trying to control everything and instead start participating in it. You stop clinging to the need to be right and start enjoying being real. You stop fearing change, failure, embarrassment, and start playing. You become like a child again, not naive, but open, curious, present. And in that state, laughter isn't a reaction. It's a way of being. A kind of spiritual exhale. Watts wasn't advocating for nihilism or detachment. Quite the opposite. He believed in diving fully into life, into its pleasures, pains, surprises, and contradictions, but without dragging around the heavy burden of identity. He saw life as a play, and us as actors who've forgotten we're on stage. The moment we remember, we can finally enjoy the performance. We can cry when it's sad, rejoice when it's joyful, and laugh when it's all too ridiculous to make sense. So I'll ask you one final question. When was the last time you truly laughed at yourself? Not with sarcasm or shame, but with compassion, with lightness, with the freedom that comes from knowing you don't have to carry the world on your back. Could you let go of the script you've been reading from just for a moment and improvise instead? Because in the end, the wisdom of not taking life too seriously isn't about escaping life. It's about entering it more fully, with open eyes, an open heart, and, yes, an open laugh. And maybe that's the real secret. When you can laugh at the game, you finally start to win it. And that, my friend, is Alan Watts' final gift. The reminder that the joke is on all of us. And that's exactly why it's beautiful.